The flowers were white roses. My mother had ordered 300 of them, flown in from Ecuador, each one arranged with the kind of obsessive precision that only someone spending someone else's money could manage. She had told me this over the phone 2 weeks ago, not to include me, but to remind me of the gap. We can afford Ecuadorian roses, Natalie. What have you done with your life lately? I had smiled and said nothing. I was good at saying nothing. The Hargrove Grand Hotel rose 42 stories above downtown Nashville, its limestone facade catching the afternoon sun like something carved from bone. I had stood outside at this same time last year, alone, and looked up at it, the way you look at something that already belongs to you but doesn't know it yet. Today I was walking through its front doors as a guest at my brother's wedding. The irony was so thick I could have worn it as a second dress. The lobby smelled like fresh gardenias and old money. Staff in navy uniforms moved like water around clusters of guests. I spotted my aunt near the fountain, already on her second glass of champagne, and I slipped right past her before she could offer me a pitying look or ask if I was still doing that little photography thing. I was not still doing that little photography thing. I found my seat in the ballroom, third row back on the left side, the family side, and I smoothed my dress and waited. Around me, relatives I hadn't seen in years leaned into each other, trading the quiet currency of gossip. I caught fragments. Did you hear she's still renting? Can you imagine? At her age? A soft laugh, quickly smothered. I kept my eyes forward and my face neutral, and I thought about the quarterly earnings report I had read on the plane. My mother appeared at the end of my row like a weather system. She was wearing ivory, the kind of choice that said she had never fully accepted that today was not, in fact, about her. She stopped when she saw me, and something moved across her face. Not warmth. Calculation. You made it, she said. Her tone implied she had not expected this, or perhaps had hoped otherwise. I wouldn't miss it, I said. She sat 2 seats away and turned to speak to my aunt. That was the greeting I got. 2 words and a turned back. I had driven 4 hours. I had not been asked to be in the wedding party. I had not been asked for a toast. My name did not appear in the program beside me. Not in the acknowledgments. Not anywhere. My brother was getting married in a hotel I owned, and my name was not in the program. I unfolded the program and read it anyway. Every thank you was addressed to someone else. To our mother, for her endless support. To our father, for his wisdom and guidance. To my sister-in-law's family, for their generosity. There was one line near the bottom, almost an afterthought, in smaller font than the rest, and to all our family and friends who joined us today. All our family and friends. I was a rounding error. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll admit that. My brother cried when he saw his bride at the end of the aisle, and for a moment, standing there in his rented tuxedo with his hands shaking and his eyes full, he looked like the boy I had grown up with, the one who used to drag me outside to catch fireflies, the one who had been, before everything, my friend. That boy had disappeared somewhere around the time I stopped being useful. The reception moved to the adjoining ballroom at 6. Tables draped in white linen, a 12-piece band, an open bar that my mother had apparently negotiated personally, and at the center of it all, a gift table, stacked with envelopes and wrapped boxes. Guests had been generous. I had seen the registry. My brother and his new wife wanted things I could have bought 40 times over without noticing the charge. I had given them something different. An envelope, white, unsealed, so it could be easily opened and easily inspected. Inside it was a card. Inside the card was a certified check for $50,000, made out to them jointly, drawn from a personal account that had nothing to do with my company's. A personal gift from me to my brother. Because whatever else was true, I still remembered the fireflies. I placed it on the gift table myself, watched a cousin with a clipboard log it in, and then went to find a drink. That was the last moment. The evening was simple. My mother found me at the bar 20 minutes later. She had that look on her face. The one she wore when she was about to perform a public kindness that was actually a private wound. She touched my arm with 2 fingers. The way you touch something you are not sure you want to contaminate yourself with. Your father wants to speak with you, she said. After dinner. As a family. What about business? She smiled at someone across the room. Your grandfather's property. You know the land trust has been sitting unresolved since he passed. We've had an offer. A very good offer. We just need everyone to agree. My grandfather had left a parcel of land in rural Tennessee to all 3 grandchildren equally. My brother, my sister, and me. 312 acres of timber and creek and rolling fields that a developer had apparently decided would make an excellent luxury subdivision. I knew the offer. I had seen the paperwork. It was significantly below market value, and the developer in question had, 2 months ago, quietly become a subsidiary of one of my holding companies. I had bought the offer on my grandfather's land. I was the developer. My family didn't know that. They also didn't know that I had spent the last 6 months building a file on every financial irregularity my father had committed in the management of that same land trust. Misappropriated timber revenue, forged distribution signatures, a tax shelter scheme that had, at its most charitable interpretation, been extremely creative with the definition of personal versus trust expenses. Of course, I said pleasantly. After dinner. Dinner was a performance I had been excluded from the rehearsal of. I was seated at a table near the back with a collection of distant relatives who were very kind and very interested in whether I had considered trying real estate as a career. I smiled through all of it. I ate the salmon. I drank one glass of wine slowly. I watched my father at the head table, laughing with my brother-in-law, refilling his glass too often, already rehearsing the version of himself he planned to deploy on me later. The band was playing something slow when my mother materialized beside me and said it was time. They had chosen one of the hotel's smaller conference rooms off the lobby. My father was already there, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow. My brother was there too, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, still in his wedding suit. My sister was there, seated at the table, her phone face down in front of her. And there was a man I didn't recognize, 50s, gray suit, the particular kind of stillness that said he was being paid by the hour. "This is Gerald," my father said. "He's handled the land trust documentation." Gerald nodded at me. I nodded back. "Sit down, Natalie," my father said. I sat. "The offer is $900,000 for the full parcel," my father began. "Split 3 ways after trust fees. That's about $280 each. Not life-changing money for everyone," he glanced at me briefly. The smallest flicker of contempt, but it's clean, it's quick, and it closes the estate. We think it's the right move. "I'd like to see the full offer documentation," I said. "Gerald has the summary. I'd like the full documentation. The original offer letter, the developer's financials, the title search, and the trust's distribution ledger for the last 7 years. The room shifted. A degree of temperature, almost imperceptible. My brother uncrossed his arms. "Natalie, it's my wedding day." "I know. I was there for the ceremony. The ledger, please." My father's jaw tightened. "We're not running an audit here. This is a family conversation." "Then let's have a family conversation." I folded my hands on the table. "How much timber revenue came out of that land in 2021? Silence. "The trust documentation shows 3 harvests, but the distribution records I requested from the county show 4. The 4th one, in November, generated approximately $84,000. That amount doesn't appear in the trust ledger. I'd like to know where it went." Gerald was very still. My father had gone the color of old concrete. "You've been snooping through county records," my sister said, her voice tight. "I've been doing due diligence," I said. "Something Gerald should have done before he agreed to help you sell this property to a developer who is, as of 2 months ago, a subsidiary of Northgate Capital Group." My brother frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "that the company making the offer on Grandpa's land is owned by a holding company. That holding company is owned by another holding company." I paused. "Which I own." The silence that followed was the specific kind that happens when the floor shifts under people who thought they were standing on solid ground. My mother made a sound. Half breath, half word. "I've been acquiring land in this county for 3 years, I continued, keeping my voice conversational, the way you'd discuss the weather or the quality of the salmon. "I started with commercial parcels, then moved to residential development tracts. Northgate has approximately $400 million in assets under management in Tennessee alone. I founded it in 2019, when I was 26, and all of you were certain I was going to fail spectacularly." My brother pushed off the wall. "You're the developer? You've been trying to buy Grandpa's land from yourself?" "I was testing whether you'd sell it without telling me. Whether you'd push me into signing away my share, without disclosing the conflict of interest or the missing timber revenue." I looked at my father. "You failed the test." My father stood up. "This is unbelievable. You come in here, on your brother's wedding day, and you pull this? You have been lying to this family for years." "I've been private," I said. "That's different. It's the same thing." "Is it?" Because I seem to recall asking, at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, whether the trust was being managed properly. "You told me to stay in my lane. You told me the finances were none of my concern. You told me," I glanced at my mother, "that I had never understood how the real world worked, and I should be grateful anyone was managing the estate at all since I clearly couldn't be trusted with anything important." My mother looked away. Before I get to what happened next, and what happened next involved a conversation that I had not planned for, and a threat I had not fully anticipated. "Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And tell me, has your family ever made you feel invisible, then expected you to show up and be grateful? Because tonight, I was done being invisible. Drop your answer below, because this story is just getting started." My father sat back down. Gerald was already checking his phone, looking for the exit. My brother was staring at me with an expression I couldn't fully read, somewhere between stunned and something that might have been, for the first time in years, respect. "So what do you want?" my father asked. His voice had dropped. The volume was gone, but not the danger. I had heard that voice my whole life, and I had learned to understand it the way you learn to read storm clouds. The quiet was not calm. It was compression. "I want the trust audited," I said, "properly, by an independent firm. I want the missing timber revenue accounted for, and returned to the trust corpus. And I want any sale of the property to go through a transparent bidding process. You're willing to blow up this family over $80,000? I'm willing to hold this family accountable, I said. Those are different things. My sister leaned forward. She had her mother's talent for stillness right before a strike. You know what I think? I think you've been sitting on this for years, saving it up, waiting for the most public moment possible to humiliate us. Your brother's wedding. That's who you are, Natalie. That's the kind of person you've become. The kind of person I've become. Built a $400 million company while you told everyone I was a failure. I didn't pick the timing. Dad scheduled this meeting. We should have known you'd make it about yourself. She shook her head, just like with Mom's surgery. And there it was. The thing they kept in reserve. The grenade they pulled out when they needed to end an argument by burning the room. 3 years ago, my mother had needed a cardiac procedure. Not emergency. Not immediately life-threatening, but necessary and not fully covered by insurance. The gap was $60,000. My father had called me. He had not asked. He had informed me that I would be contributing, and that the family expected no less. I had been 29, 18 months into building Northgate, still leveraged to the edge of what I could manage. I had taken a personal loan. I had paid the $60,000. 6 weeks after my mother's surgery, I had found out by accident, through a cousin who let something slip at Easter, that my parents had received a settlement from the hospital for a billing dispute. $48,000. They had deposited it and said nothing. They had not offered to repay any portion of my loan. When I asked, my mother had told me that family didn't keep score, and I was being hurtful by raising it. My sister knew this story. She was invoking it now, not because it was relevant, but because it was a wound she knew the location of. That's not going to work tonight, I said quietly. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like the closing of a door. I'm not 22 anymore. I'm not going to apologize for existing inconveniently. Then what are you going to do? My father asked. Sue your own family? Take us to court? Is that what this is? If the audit finds what I believe it will find, the trust beneficiaries have legal standing to seek restitution. That's not a threat. It's a fact. What happens next is your choice. Gerald cleared his throat. I think it might be best if You should stay, I said pleasantly. You'll want to hear this part. I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. It was thin, 8 pages, printed on plain paper. I had not brought it in to be dramatic. I had brought it because I had learned, over years of negotiation, that people believe paper in a way they don't always believe words. This is a summary of the trust discrepancies. Copies have already been sent to a trust litigation attorney and to the Tennessee Department of Revenue. I slid it toward Gerald. If the audit is completed voluntarily within 60 days and restitution is made to the trust, I'm prepared to consider the matter resolved internally. If not, the documentation moves forward. My father's hand came down flat on the table, hard enough that the water glasses trembled. You think you can walk in here and threaten me? I am your father. You are the trustee of an estate you've been mismanaging, I said. That's a legal relationship, not just a personal one. Everything you have, he started. I built myself, I said. It came out flat and clear, no heat in it, just fact. I built it alone, without your help, without your connections, and without your approval. For a long time I thought I needed that approval. I want you to know that I don't. I haven't for a while. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. My brother moved away from the wall and sat down at the table. He looked tired. Not angry, just tired. Natalie, he said. I didn't know about the ledger. I want you to know that. I looked at him. I believed him. My brother was many things, but he had never been good at lying. That had always been left to our parents. I know, I said. This is really what you want? On today of all days? He scheduled the meeting, I said again. I showed up. Before my father could speak again, the door opened. I had not expected that. The woman who entered was in her early 40s, dark blazer, visitor's lanyard from the hotel. She glanced around the room and then settled on me. Miss Hartwell? I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a situation at the front desk that requires your attention. My family looked at her, then at me. My sister's voice dropped. Why is the hotel staff looking for you? The woman waited patiently. I stood, smoothed my dress, and picked up my bag. Because, I said, I own the hotel. I want you to picture their faces. I have replayed the moment many times since, and I still cannot fully describe it. My father looked like a man who has just bitten into something and cannot decide whether to spit it out. My mother had gone entirely still, the way animals go still when they realize they are no longer the predator. My sister's mouth was open. My brother, to his credit, let out a single breath of stunned laughter, which he quickly covered with his hand. Gerald picked up his briefcase and excused himself without a word. I followed the woman out. Her name was Diane, and she was the hotel's director of operations. She had worked for the property through 2 previous ownership groups and had stayed on when Northgate acquired it 14 months ago. She was excellent at her job and I trusted her completely, which was why I had called her that morning when I landed and told her there might be a situation. Everything okay? she asked quietly as we walked through the lobby. Getting there, I said. Your family is something else, she said, with the particular diplomatic neutrality of someone who had overheard more than she was going to mention. They are, I agreed. That they are. I did not go back to the conference room that night. I went to the terrace on the 32nd floor, where the Nashville skyline was doing what it does best. Lights stacked in layers, the river moving dark below, the kind of view that makes you feel both small and, if you let it, powerful. I stood there for a while, just breathing. My phone buzzed at 9:47. My brother. I let it ring once, then picked up. Are you still in the building? He said. 32. A pause. Can I come up? He arrived 10 minutes later, still in his wedding suit, bow tie loosened. He stood beside me at the railing and looked out at the city. We didn't say anything for a while. How long? He asked eventually. Northgate? About 5 years since I started building it seriously. The hotel, 14 months. And you never said anything. You never asked, I said. Not as an accusation, just as true. He turned the champagne glass in his hands. Dad's going to fight this. I know. He's going to say you ambushed the family, that you planned all of this. I planned the audit documentation. Yes. He planned a meeting to pressure me into signing away land rights, without disclosing a financial conflict. We both came prepared. My brother was quiet. Then, the surgery money. I don't need it back. I didn't know about that either. I figured. He set down the glass on the railing and looked at me directly for the first time in what felt like years. He had our grandfather's eyes, the same shade of gray-green, the same directness in them when he chose to use it. I'm sorry, he said. For how long it's been. For not asking. I had spent a lot of years imagining what I would feel when someone in my family said that. I had imagined relief, or anger, or the loosening of something held too tight. What I actually felt was quieter, not empty, just settled, like a room after the windows have been opened. Thank you, I said. We stood there a while longer. Below us, the wedding was still going on in the ballroom. The band had moved to something up-tempo. My sister-in-law was probably dancing. The roses from Ecuador were probably still perfect. What happens now? My brother asked. The trust gets audited. Whatever the audit finds, we deal with it. The land doesn't have to be sold, not to Northgate, not to anyone, unless all three of us agree. That's what the trust document says, and I intend to honor it. And the hotel? Still my hotel. I smiled slightly. Your guests are getting the friends and family rate, by the way. I made sure of it. He laughed. A real one this time. Natalie, it's your wedding. I'm not a monster. He shook his head. You know they're never going to accept this. Mom and Dad. They're going to rewrite tonight in their heads, until they're the victims. I know, I said. I stopped needing them to understand a long time ago. I just needed to stop pretending the ledger was balanced when it wasn't. My brother left around 10. I stayed on the terrace another hour, watching the city. My phone had 19 notifications, cousins, my aunt, a blocked number that was almost certainly Gerald, and 3 messages from my mother that I read but did not answer. The first was wounded. The second was angry. The third was 3 words. Call me, please. I would call her. Eventually. Not tonight. I thought about what it costs to be quiet for a long time. The specific tax that gets levied on people who learn early that their voice makes things worse. So they swallow it down, and go smaller, and build everything behind glass, where the wrong hands can't reach it. I had paid that tax for a decade. I had paid it in instant noodles and borrowed money, and not correcting people when they called me the family disappointment at Christmas. I had also, it turned out, paid it in equity and interest and compound annual returns. And the bill had finally come due. My grandfather used to say, still water runs deep, Natalie girl. Don't let them see the current. He had meant it as a survival tip. I had taken it as a blueprint. The audit was completed 11 weeks later. The findings were approximately what I had anticipated. $84,000 in unaccounted timber revenue, and an additional $31,000 in trust funds used for personal expenses over a period of 4 years. My father's attorney reached out within 48 hours of receiving the report. The restitution was completed in 2 installments over 90 days. No charges were filed, no court appearances. Just a number on a wire transfer and the sound of a door closing on a version of my family I had been pretending existed long past its expiration date. My sister sent me 1 email in the months that followed. It was 3 paragraphs long, and at no point contained an apology. But it did contain a request. Could I look into whether any of my companies were hiring, as her current position was proving unsatisfying? I read it twice. I thought about the years she had spent elbowing me out of photographs and rolling her eyes at family dinners and agreeing with my parents every time they decided I wasn't quite good enough. I thought about the word unsatisfying and the assumption that sat beneath it that whatever I had built was available to her by virtue of blood. I wrote back 2 sentences. I hope you find something that works for you. I'm not in a position to help with this one. I pressed send, and I did not feel guilty. My mother called 3 months after the wedding, on a Sunday afternoon when I was in the middle of reviewing a development proposal. I let it ring twice before I picked up. She asked how I was. I said fine, She said she had been thinking about things. I said that was good. She said she hadn't realized how much she hadn't noticed. I said I understood. There was a long pause where I think she was waiting for me to fill it with the absolution she had come to expect from me, the way you expect a faucet to produce water when you turn the handle. I didn't fill it. Eventually, she said she'd like to have lunch sometime. I said I'd check my calendar. I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. My calendar is genuinely difficult. And also I had decided that availability was something I would give only to people who had learned to value it. She could earn her place in my schedule the same way everyone else did. The land is still intact. 312 acres of Tennessee countryside, timber and creek and rolling fields. The same as it was when my grandfather walked it in work boots and knew the name of every tree on the southern ridge. It is still in trust, 3 ways, equitably divided. It does not need to be sold. It does not need to be developed. I own enough of Nashville already. Sometimes I drive out there on weekends. I park at the old gate and walk the perimeter trail that my grandfather cut by hand, and I stand at the top of the East Ridge where the view opens up toward the Cumberland, and I think about all the things I didn't say for all the years I didn't say them. I don't say them there either. There's no one to say them to, but I know them now. I know my own name and my own number, and the exact dollar value of what I built in the years they thought I was failing. I know what I paid, and I know what I kept, and I know, with the kind of clarity that only comes after a very long time of not knowing, that the inheritance worth having was never in that trust document. It was the years alone. It was the early mornings. It was the discipline of building something real in the silence while they celebrated everything decorative and temporary and loud. My grandfather taught me to be still water. They never figured out how far down it goes.